Yes, yes.
Are you guys all crying? Do you need a minute? I needed 5 freaking minutes in the ladies' room. I gotta say. And you may need a minute. I'm Mary McNamara. I'm a culture columnist at the Los Angeles Times, and I'm very happy to welcome Maggie O'Farrell here. Novelist and screenwriter. I'm afraid to tell you that Chloé Zhao will not be able to attend tonight. Obviously, she's not here because she's not feeling well. So you'll just have to make do with a Mac and an O, and we'll have fun. We'll have fun. These lights are super intense. I can't see any of you. I'm assuming you're all out there. Thank you so much for coming. She just got here yesterday, so like I'm just like floored now, even as you said, even awake. So thank you so much for coming out at this hour. Congratulations on this movie. Obviously, you know, belated congratulations on your wonderful book, many books. And also you won the Audience Award at the London Film Festival, and already the film is being It's just an incredible achievement. So yes, congratulations. So before we get to the film, I wondered how many people here have read the book? I'm also to tell you when you leave, there are free copies. So yeah, we do right. Free copies of the book, so don't forget to pick them up on the way out. So can we start at the beginning and talk about the book first, and like sort of how you came to write Hamlet, and yeah, just briefly tell the story of how you came to write Hamlet, because it's a departure for you from your other work, from your other novels. So how did that happen?
Yeah.
Well, it was a book that I wanted to write for a really long time, and I had the idea, I think in about 2013 or 2014, if I look back at my notebooks. But I'm not a very superstitious person, but I really had a strong superstition that I couldn't write this book until my own son was safely past the age of 11. Not that there was a massive risk of him contracting the plague, but you never know, you can't be too careful about this kind of thing. So I had the idea, and I would kind of circle around it, and I'd buy lots of books about Shakespeare, and every now and again I'd have a go, and then I'd think, no, who writes a novel about Shakespeare? That's a ridiculous idea.
But it's not, I mean, it isn't really, I mean, it is a novel about Shakespeare, although in the book you will notice, those of you who have read it, he's never named, which is astonishing. And he's only named once in the film, I think, just the one time at the end. But it's about, obviously, his wife and his family, and so it's astonishing to me, you know, here's a man who is perhaps the most influential writer of all time, right? Certainly one of them, and we know so little about him. So when you say you've been wanting to write this book, like what was the spark? Just finding out that, you know, I mean, I learned in my Shakespeare class that he had a son who died, and that was sort of like when he moved from comedy to tragedy, and that Hamlet may or may not have been his way of coping with the death of his son. So was that sort of the starting point for you?
Yeah, I was very lucky that I had a brilliant literature teacher at school.
You taught you more than that?
Sorry. And we were studying the play Hamlet when I was about 16, and I loved the play. It really got under my skin, and I think it does for a certain type of adolescent who maybe wears too much black, a lot of eyeliner, hangs about in graveyards taking black and white photos, and that was definitely me. So I really felt like I was kind of suddenly related to Hamlet. And then my teachers just said in passing one day that he'd had a son, Shakespeare had a son by the name of Hamnet, who had died about 4 years before he wrote the play Hamlet. And even though I was a really long time away from being a writer, it just really struck me. I remember looking at my school issue of the book and putting my finger over the L and taking it off again and thinking, you know, it's the same name. And what does that mean? And even then I knew, you know, that's really significant. Nobody casually would just give their dead son's name to a play and a prince and a ghost. You know, I knew that it was really significant. So I've just always been fascinated by it, and you know, the link between this dead boy and the making of, I think anyway, his best play. And it always struck me that not many, I mean, you sound very unusual knowing that Hamlet existed, because I don't think many people do, or many people did. You know, I have friends who like me, have got degrees in literature, and when I was told of what I was working on, they said to me, "You can't make that up. You can't make up the fact that shit." And I said, "No, I promise you, it's true." You can see it. It's in the parish records. So it always made me sad. I think that not enough people knew about Hamnet and how much we owe him. You know, I wanted to write the book to say to people, this child was important and he was grieved and he was loved, and without him, we would not have Hamlet, and we probably wouldn't have Twelfth Night.
Well, that's a very, I mean, that's a big leap. I mean, I like that he was grieving, but the idea that if we didn't have the boy Hamnet, we wouldn't have the play Hamlet is a big and wonderful leap. But as I say, I mean, it's like, we really, you know, there's only like a brief, I mean, isn't it just like a document, a church document, like that says that he had the twins and that one of the twins died, I think. And we know almost nothing about his wife, who is either Agnes, not pronounced Agnes, or Anne, right? So when you said, you know, you thought about, well, I'm going to write about this book about Shakespeare, but then you turn, I mean, the book is about her more than anything else, more than him, I think. So what was that process like of deciding that?
Well, I always thought I was going to write a book about fathers and sons, as of course the play is. But what happened was that while I was researching the book, and I was reading all these biographies of Shakespeare and all these scholarly works about him, and trying to kind of work out who he was and what happened. I mean, even, you know, despite, you know, hundreds and hundreds of hours and weeks and years that people have devoted to finding out as much as they can about him, there are still gaps in his story. He himself is quite a mysterious person, but his wife is even more mysterious. But what happened was that I was researching him and thinking I was going to write this story about father and son, but actually I got really sidetracked by how badly his wife has been treated by history and scholars and Shakespeareans. You know, that she's just attracted for no reason that I could see all this hatred and criticism and actually downright misogyny, unfortunately. You know, we've always been taught this narrative about her, that she trapped him into marriage, that she was illiterate, she was stupid. I've seen very respected scholars saying she was ugly, and you know, he hates her. Based on literally nothing. There's one pencil sketch of her which is done, I think it's dated about 80 years after she died, but apparently it was done from life. And in it, actually, she bears a striking resemblance to Saoirse Ronan, who I think we can all agree is quite far from ugly.
Well, in Shakespeare in Love, like, you know,
yeah,
that was the worst.
I like that film, but that speech where he says, "I hate her."
Yeah.
I really.
So when you were going about, so it shifted obviously from fathers and sons. I mean, it is still about fathers and sons, but she is. I mean, you chose to write the book in third person omniscient, I believe, but it is very much focused on her, or in her mind a lot. I mean, it's in his mind too, but how did you come about creating this character, which you guys have just seen the film, who's like this very like mystical, earthy, connected to the woods, the magical woods, and just a very unique person. I mean, you could have gone, you know, since we know nothing about her, you could have gone virtually any way with her. So how did you come up with that? And were you thinking, because when I was reading the book, I was thinking Midsummer's Night Dream. You know, it's like she feels like very Midsummer's Night Dream. Were you thinking at all about the Shakespeare's works and like what kind of woman he might have actually married and then been influenced by?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the big departure point for me creating her character was I read, because like you say, there's not much about her at all. There's not even her birth record, because she was born before records began. She was born in a village just outside Stratford-upon-Avon called Shottery. So we don't really know when she was born, and we know that she got married, and we know that she had 3 children, and one of them died when he was 11. But beyond that, there's not really much about her at all. But one of the documents I read was her father's will. So her father was Richard Hathaway, a sheep farmer, and he died a year before she married William. And in it, he leaves her a very generous dowry, and he refers to her as my daughter Agnes, or Agnes. And that was a real kind of lightning bolt moment, because I thought, you know, on top of everything else, we've been calling by the wrong name 500 years, and it just seemed really emblematic to me of how she's been so misunderstood and misrepresented. So I suppose I wanted to give this name back to her, and also to invite the reader to forget everything they think they know or have been taught about Anne Hathaway from various and I really wanted them to open up and meet this person, Agnes Shakespeare. But like you say, I did go back to the plays to try and find her, because I think, contrary to what a lot of scholars say, that he was very in love with her, and they did have a deep relationship. And partly the fact, there were two things that really persuaded me of that, two absolutely incontrovertible facts, was that all the money he earned in London, and he earned a lot of money, he was the equivalent of a multi-millionaire towards the end of his career, he sent all of it back to Stratford, and he lived in a one-room lodging in the city of London. So everything he sent back to Stratford. He bought a large house for them the year after Hamlet died, and he bought fields and cottages that he rented out. And I really love the idea that in Stratford-upon-Avon at that time he was probably better known as a landlord than anything else, than maybe as a playwright. But also at the end of his career, when he could have lived anywhere he wanted, but he chose to leave London and go back to Stratford-upon-Avon and live with her. And I think that's not the action of a man who hated his wife. So I went back to the plays, and like you say, so The Forest of Arden, which appears in Midsummer Night's Dream, which as you all know, I'm not going to womansplain to you what The Forest of Arden is, but actually The Forest of Arden was real. Shakespeare's mother, Mary, her maiden name was Arden, and The Forest of Arden was something that, it was a huge forest, ancient original forest that surrounded Stratford. There's a tiny, tiny pocket of it left that you can just see. But like a lot of Britain, it's been deforested. So it was real, that forest, and it was very, very thick, and it was dangerous to walk through it, because you could get hoodwinked. We're getting kind of Robin Hood territory now. You can get there are people who apparently lived in there called woodkerns who never ever came out, and they lived their whole lives inside the wood. So you can see where all the imagery from Midsummer Night's Dream came from. But also, one of the things that I obviously reread Hamlet a lot, and I went back and looked at all the wives in the plays, and was trying to find her, really. And the one scene that I found really evocative for me was the scene where Ophelia, in her madness, hands herbs to all the other characters. And actually, if you go back to original records of the time, you can see that everything she gives to them isn't just a random flower. It has a specific cure for a fault she sees in their character. So that scene is written from the perspective of someone who really knows their herbology. And I also read that every single household at that time would have had a medicinal garden. And it was the purview of the mother, or the matriarch of the house, to kind of cure common ailments with these plants. And I just thought, he's writing this from a point of view of someone who really knows what they're talking about. But would he have known, actually? Would this son of a glover, who was actually a scholar in Latin and Greek, and went off to London, I don't think he would have known that. So I had this image of him writing that scene, and him just turning around and calling out to her, his wife, what do we use roux for? What's comfrey for? And him just putting it in play. And I thought, you can she's briefly visible in that scene, I think.
That's amazing when you think of all the Shakespearean gardens there are in the world now. It's like, maybe that's all her. Maybe that's all her. That's the reason. So let's talk about the film. Now, at what point, the book came out, award-winning, best-selling. At what point were you approached, or did you think this could be a film? It's not the most natural book, because it is so lyrical, so often interior, that, not the easiest. Although you are hungry to see the things that are described so beautifully in the book. But so how did the movie come to be?
Well, the usual, I don't know if there are any other novelists in the audience, but the usual trajectory from novels to screen is that somebody might buy an option for your book, which is always great, and then you might have a few kind of quite exciting phone calls or Zoom calls where producers or whatever say to you, oh, it's really exciting, we've got this, we're going to get this person to write it, this person's going to star in it. And you say, oh, fantastic. And then you don't hear from them ever again. And that's what happened, that's happened last time. I always think, well, it's quite nice if someone buys an option for your book, it's a little nice bit of cash. And so Liza Marshall, a producer, bought Hamnet. Well, it wasn't quite published, so she bought it, and I thought, okay, I'll just do something nice with this money and carry on as normal. a little bit later on, she called me up and she said,
I think that
well, Chloé Zhao's interested.
I can barely hear.
So this is before it was published.
No, this was a bit. Eliza bought it, and then there was a long gap, you know, which is what always happens. And I thought that was that. But then she came back to me and said, Chloé Zhao's interested, and I was immediately quite excited because I mean, I'd seen Chloe's films and I loved them, and I knew that she was not someone who was going to make a kind of prissy sort of costume drama. And I also knew that she didn't come from a background or a culture that was necessarily steeped in Shakespeare, so I knew that she was going to come at it from an interesting angle, which seemed to me the right way to do it. Anyway, but Liza, the producer, said to me, but Chloe wants you to write the script with her. And I thought, oh, well, I'm not going to do that. But I've moved on to a new book, so you know, it's not really my thing. So I got on a Zoom call with Chloe, and I was all ready to say, you know, it's really flattering, and thank you for asking me, but I'm not going to do it. But then weirdly, by the end of the conversation, I was shutting my laptop, and I thought, what the hell just happened? Because I'd already agreed to do it, and also to hand in the first pass of the script in about 2 months.
Oh.
And I went back to the kitchen, my husband was there, and he said, oh, how did she take it? And I said, actually, I am going to do it. So, yeah, it's close, very persuasive.
It's not exactly Chloé Zhao. So, I mean, it is unusual. It's an unusual. I mean, it is not usual for an author to adapt their own book. It is also not usual for the author and the director to like collaborate on a screenplay. I was looking to see if I could find another one. So, I mean, that's kind of, you know. So it's funny to find that it was her idea, because I wondered if it was your idea, if like it was something you wanted to do. Because writing a screenplay is very different from writing a novel. So how did you? I'm just very curious, like how you set about doing it. You share credit on it. So So did you do a draft, and then she did a draft? How did that work?
I mean, it really was very collaborative, I would say. You know, the first kind of conversation, well, the second conversation we had, the first one was when she put a spell on me and I agreed to do it. The second conversation we had was about how to kind of dismantle the book, in a sense, from the page and sort of reassemble it, I think, for the screen. And Chloe had a very clear idea of what she wanted to take from the book, you know, to retain from the book. Because obviously, you know, making a screenplay, which is what, I don't know, 90 pages, 100 pages from a 350-ish page novel, you know, the first sort of task is really to distill it down, to just distill it down to the pith, in a sense. And also the book, I mean, it's not very chronologically complex, but it does go back and forth in time, which is fine on the page, but it's a bit sticky on screen. So we had to kind of, you know, decide at which point in the book it was going to start, and she had a very clear idea about that. And I think she and I have very, very different skills, but I think they're quite complementary in a way. Chloe is an amazing lever of voice notes. I don't know if anyone in this room knows about this. And because when we were writing, and especially the initial, for the first year or so we were writing the script, she was, I think, living in LA, and I'm usually in Scotland or Ireland, which is, you know, there's quite a big time difference. And so I would often wake up in the morning and switch on my phone, and then just be this ping, 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 ping. And I think, oh, Chloe's been busy. And I would open up, and so she loves to leave a voice note, or many voice notes actually, that happens, some of which would be, I don't know, a minute or two. And the longest ever, which I did write down because I thought I'm going to forget this, it was 58 minutes.
That's like a podcast.
Yeah, I was listening to it. And, you know, I would listen to them and I'd write them down. I had a special notebook for Chloé Zhao voice notes. And my daughter came in and said,
to make these available.
My daughter came in and said, why are you listening to a podcast early in the morning? And I said, it's not, it's Chloe.
Oh my gosh. So she was like, what? Just talking you through what? I mean, because you must have had to learn how to write a screenplay. It isn't like, you know, I mean, it's not the same as writing a novel. It's
not at all.
A whole different skill set.
I mean, I think she actually, and this is a contrast to me, because I think when she's actually thinking about something or working out how she feels about something, she likes to verbalize it, or she extemporizes. Whereas if I'm trying to work something out, I will always have to write it down. So I think we've got a very different attitude, I suppose, in a way which kind of works, I think. So we did the kind of macro sort of scale of things. working out what's going to go where, and then we kind of narrowed down to the micro, you know, how to make this scene in the book work on the screen. And you know, I mean, she's so experienced, it goes without saying. But also there was the kind of sense that, you know, I'd done all the research and I wrote the book, so I could sort of instinctively say, if she said, you know, we need to lose that aspect of the book, I was able to say, well, actually, if we take that away, several scenes down the line, the dynamic between these characters seems odd because we're missing something here. So, yeah, it was very collaborative at every stage, I think.
Did she tell you why she wanted you to? I mean, did she explain? Because I mean, this has nothing to do with you or her, but it is not traditional, in part because the director traditionally wants to be in charge. The screenwriter in film is not usually a moving force, and if the screenplay has been adapted from a novel, what they basically want is for the novelist to go away. Like, they want them to sign the papers and then don't say anything so that they can be free to do what they need to do to turn it into a movie without the novelist saying, oh my God, you cut my favorite character, or, you know, whatever. And I'm not saying that all novelists do that. Many novelists completely understand that it's an adaptation. But for a director to say, I want the novelist to write the screenplay, that's like I said, very unusual. Did she ever explain it to you? Like, why? Did she just think you were the one who would get it because it was your baby? I mean,
I don't know, she said two things. The first thing she said was that she wanted to make the book, and that was on the original Zoom call. She picked up the book and kind of brandished it at the screen and said, I want to make the book, I want to make a film of the book, which is quite persuasive, really. And then, I mean, she's also said, and there's absolutely no reason for this, I think, that she wasn't confident enough in her English, but her English is great, so. But I think she was worried. She said, you know, I'm not a Shakespearean person, so I think she needed someone who did know that world, I think, which is probably why I guess that's why she asked me.
Well, I mean, and it sounds like it was a really good collaboration, like a good experience. I mean, was it hard? Did you weep? Were there things that you were like, I can't believe this isn't going to make it? Or let me just start. What was the biggest challenge for you as a novelist, as the writer of this novel, like bringing it to the screen? Because obviously there were things you had to lose, and there were chronology you had to lose, and
I think if you're a novelist and you're going into this process, you can't go into it feeling, you know, this is mine and it has to be the way that I wanted it. You know, you have to think, the book was the way I wanted it, and that was mine, and this is Chloé's. You know, you can't expect it to be a replica. There'd be no point. You know, what would be the point of making a replica of it, because it already exists. And I think you always just have to accept the fact that any adaptation of your book, whether it's on the stage or on the film, is going to sit alongside it rather than be the same thing. And I was quite happy to, you know, there would be no way on earth that I could direct a film. I wouldn't even know where to start. So I was very happy to hand that over to her. And it should be, you know, it's her film. It's a Chloé Zhao film, and it's Chloé Zhao's Hamnet. The book is mine and the film is hers.
So what were some of the, you know, her changes or her insights into the story that opened it up for you as a writer?
I think I knew that she was very keen to
I'll meet you in the lobby.
make a deep dive into Agnes's kind of forest life and herbology and her kind of magical powers. I think that's the story I think that caught her attention first. So that's the element of it. And of course, there inevitably there were going to be things that appear in the book that don't appear in the film, but that's as it should be. And I think that, you know, I think any adaptation of a book is you have to externalise what's internal. You know, novels tend to be internal, and you have to externalise people's thoughts. And there are different ways to do that. So prosaically, in the final scene, in the novel, Agnes goes into the Globe Theatre on her own, and she's thinking about the play and what it means to her. But so the easiest thing in the script was her brother comes in with her, so she can talk to him, so the audience can hear and feel what she's feeling. But in the very kind of Chloé Zhao way, earlier in the book, I mean, Chloé's very good at doing this. She's very good at sublimating people's emotions into landscape. I mean, she does that in The Rider, she does it in Nomadland, and she does it beautifully, I think, in Hamlet. You know, the sounds of the forest are so beautiful in the film, the way it's filmed, and the trees, and it just looks so beautiful.
No, No, it's absolutely beautiful. And at that final scene, even like Jessie Buckley just does such an extraordinary job of letting, with her face. She does talk to her brother a little bit, but you just see all the things that in the book she is thinking just play across her face. It's really tremendous. I'm looking at the time, and somebody was going to give me time, and I can't see anybody. So, do we still have time? Can I ask more questions? Okay, nobody's telling me no, so I'm going to keep going until you guys decide we got to get out of here. I don't know how long we have the theater for. If they start sweeping the floors, do let me know. So after you finished the screenplay, were you on set? I'm assuming you went to some of the sets?
I did, yeah. I was on all the sets, and that was incredibly exciting.
And did you have anything to do with that? Because the research that must have gone into building the sets and like creating the costumes and all of that. I mean, obviously the production designer and the costume designer are all going to do their own research, but were you part of that at all? Because you've done all the research for the book?
I wasn't, I had lots of conversations with them, the costume and the set and design, and it was kind of, my favourite thing about being on set was that I discovered that there was this huge kind of, it was like a sort of warehouse of people sewing tiny little pleats into lace collars and putting whalebone in sort of corsets and stuff, and it was fascinating. And so they make these incredibly beautiful sort of period specific costumes, and then at the end of the warehouse there was this room where basically they just beat the shit out of all the clothes that had just been made and they were literally hitting them with chains and sticks and chucking them in the mud and stamping on them so that they looked worn, which was perfect, but I found it so heartbreaking. Also, I really wanted to have a go, but they didn't.
Well, also because they'd spent so much time making them and then beat them up. Okay, so I've just got the 2-minute sign. Okay. And did you have anything to do, like in terms of, not with casting, did you talk about, was this who you saw in your mind's eye when you were?
I mean, I wouldn't say, it's funny when it sort of gets out that you're having a film made. Suddenly you get all these kind of emails from people saying, my daughter really wants back. And I kept saying, I don't have any say in it, good luck to your daughter, but it's not really very soon. But Chloe was great. Chloe sent me a lot of the audition tapes, so we did see it. And I have to say, I always wanted it to be Paul Mescal. I was always kept saying, Paul Mescal, please, everybody.
Yes, I think many people feel the same.
Yeah, it's also funny, when it was announced, lots of people said, oh, can I meet him? And I'd say, just to be clear, he's not moving in with me. I was adopting him. But I saw him on stage in Dublin at the Gate Theatre when he was, I think he must have been a student, and he was playing Stephen Dedalus in the Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man. And even then, you could tell that he was something really special. But also there's a kind of thematic link between Stephen and Hamlet. And so I just kept saying it's got to be him. And Jessie Buckley, I mean, Chloe just said straight away it has to be Jessie. That was the only person she could ever see as Onias. And she's the dream actress, she's amazing. But the children were incredible. Yeah, I mean, Chloe found them. It wasn't me, but yeah, they're incredible. And I saw a photo of Jackie Beer. He didn't look like the Hamlet that I had imagined, but then I saw the audition tape and I thought, okay, wow, yes, that's him.
I mean, that must be, especially with something like this where it's not just your imagination, but also a period, and also a period, it's Shakespeare.
Was he in the show before?
It's in our, cultural consciousness of Stratford-on-Avon and everything like that. It must have been extraordinary to just be there and watch it be filmed. And you said that you were in the editing bay sometimes, and did you see dailies and everything like that?
Yeah, I did. It was a very exciting time. But there was one I did, because I kept saying it may not happen, it may not happen. And there was one point where I was standing in the reproduction of the Globe Theatre, so it was a 3/4 size.
Yeah, they built the Globe.
They built the Globe Theatre, just your average day.
They didn't use the Globe in London, did they?
No, apparently it was cheaper to build it. So I was standing in it, and I took a phone call from a friend of mine, and I put her on FaceTime, and I said, "Oh, look where I am." And she said to me, "Do you admit now that it's happening?" And I said, "Okay, fine." It's happening.
Well, I'm afraid we have to end now, but that's a good way to end. Thank you so much.